Okay, hello guys. Today we are going to be talking about working papers. Okay, so audit working papers. This is an important topic, but we actually don't get to discuss about it in class. And so I thought it would be nice if I did a video where I just briefly went over what a working paper is and how we use a working paper. And hopefully that can help you guys when you are trying to understand auditing. So my first question that I want to ask is, what are working papers? Okay, so what is the purpose of the working paper? The first thing that we need to understand is the working paper is the only place that a auditor can store his audit evidence, right? So the audit file is the only place that the auditor stores his audit evidence, and obviously the audit file is made up of working papers. So the first thing is, altogether, the working papers, they make up the audit file. Okay. The next thing is, it is generally, most working papers are generally, they are prepared by the audit team. And if you remember correctly, last semester, when we were chatting about audit evidence, we said that anything prepared by the auditor or the audit team is actually considered to be high value evidence. Okay. The other thing that's important is all of our audit procedures take place in working papers, right? So it actually records our audit procedures as well as the results of those audit procedures, okay, which we term evidence, right? So we call that audit evidence. What you will find is in the standard, they actually call audit working papers, they give it a more professional sounding name, and the name that they call it is audit documentation. Okay, so that's what they call it in terms of the standard. Then let's talk a little bit about the purpose of the audit working paper. So I'm going to remove this one. The purpose of audit working papers we touched on it already a little bit, but basically the audit working paper holds all of our audit evidence, right? In addition to that, the audit working paper helps us to support our audit opinion. Okay, because what it does is it actually records all of our documentation, all of our evidence, and so because of that we can use it when we're wanting to support our audit opinion. So how, for example, when we're auditing a specific section, we might say, oh, we're looking for supporting documentation. This is in fact our supporting documentation for our audit opinion. Okay. The next thing that our audit working paper helps us to do is it ensures that we are in accordance and all of our work that's done is in accordance with, and there's always generally three things that we talk about. The first is the international standards for auditing. The next is if we're auditing a sector that requires lots of legal compliance, we may have some legal requirements that we are required to meet, right? So any legal requirements. And then most importantly, I think for the auditor, is we need to ensure that we've got some sort of quality in our audit, right? So it helps us to make sure that we have all of these sort of boxes ticked. Okay, what we will find is that the audit working paper is often referred to and is used a lot when it comes to audit planning, right? So when we're doing our audit plan, our working paper has to talk back to our audit plan, right? So it comes out, our working paper comes out of our audit plan. Okay, so it must have some sort of relation to our audit plan, has to speak to our audit plan. We also then use our audit working paper to supervise, right? So we like to see, for example, what our trainees are doing, right? So we like to supervise our trainees using our audit working paper. And we also use our audit working paper to identify significant issues. Okay, so we want to identify and record significant issues. Oops. That we find, okay, in the audit. So these are the reasons, or these are the purposes of our audit working paper. Next, we just want to quickly or briefly look at a sample working paper. Just give me a minute while I find it. Okay, so this is our working paper. So this is a sample working paper. I will put a copy up of this working paper on the internet so you guys can see it. And I just want to point out a few important parts of the working paper so that you can identify it the next time you sort of looking at a working paper. Let me just see if I can zoom in a little bit. Okay. So the first thing that's very important is we want to know the audit client, right? So the audit client's name generally appears at the top of the working paper. So in this example, our audit client is example company 2. Okay. Then the next thing that's very important is the year end. So in this working paper, I've called it balance sheet date, but most of us already know that balance sheet date means the year-end date. Now, why is the year-end date important? The year-end date gives context to the working paper. So, for example, it will tell us what we should be testing. So when we come down here and we're looking at dates, we want to make sure that these dates are falling within this year-end, right? So that's why it's important. It also helps us to understand when the work was done in relation to the year end. Okay, so that's why the date is important. The next thing is important is the preparer's name, right? So who prepared it. right? So this is the preparer's name. In this specific example, we have the initials of the preparer. That is often used in audit, right? Because we all sort of know who on the team owns these initials. So that's why that's used. And then the date of preparation. Now, the date of preparation is important because when we are preparing it, we want to make sure that firstly the review happens after that date. So if you look here, the 25th of February, that was after the date of preparation. And also we want to contextualize the date of preparation in relation to the year end. For example, if we were seeing this date being in 20x6, we would assume that we need to find some sort of roll forward testing because the date is too early. So now we can see, based on this date, which is 20x7, that it's happening after year end, so we don't need roll forward, and it's happening before the review, so the complete work is being reviewed by the partner, manager, or whoever is reviewing it. Okay. We've then got the reviewer's name, right? So this is the reviewer's name here. Reviewer's name. The reviewer's name is important so that we can see the rank of the reviewer. So is it a partner, is it an audit manager, or for example, is it a first year trainee? We need to make sure that the correct level is reviewing the work, and then obviously, as mentioned before, the date, right? So the date of review. The date of review is important. Okay. In this specific working paper, I ask, is this prepared? Is the following work prepared by the client? No, right? This is an optional thing. It's not always found in all working papers. But it's interesting here because what we are actually doing in this working paper is we're testing a bank. So we're looking at a bank, and so generally interest is difficult to calculate at a bank, and so we sometimes use work that's provided by the client, and we test that work for accuracy and so on. So it's important in this case that we ask, is it prepared by the audit client or by the bank? Then you guys will have a look at this, and you will see that I've got here the title. So it says interest on trade receivables, right? So this is the title of the working paper. So the title of the working paper is important because it helps us to see what sort of procedures we have done, okay, in relation to this balance. It helps us to understand if there's more work that's needed. So for example, we look at this and we'll say to ourselves, okay, maybe we've only tested existence in this working paper. I want to see another working paper on the same title or in the same section dealing with the other assertions. Okay? We then move on to the objective or aim. Sometimes it's called aim. In the objective or aim, we are looking for an assertion. So what assertion is being tested? And as you can see, I don't know if you can, but here in this specific working paper, we are trying to test existence. Okay, so it's clearly marked the existence, so we know exactly what we are trying to test, and that helps us because it puts the rest of the working paper in context. Okay, so it tells us we're trying to test existence. Then we move on to the next part of the working paper, which is the audit procedures. Now, audit procedures are critical because, firstly, we want to make sure. So we want to know what we're looking at, right, and what is being done by the trainee. And so we want to look at the audit procedures, but also it tells us how do these audit procedures relate back to that assertion, right? And then the second thing we want to look for is how are these audit procedures actually correctly applied below. So we want to know, has it been done correctly and is it appropriate for us to do these procedures? We're not going to get into the procedure now, but just basically we want to have a description of the audit procedures that are coming out. Okay. Right, so the next thing that we find on our working paper, I'm just going to shift this up a little bit, is we actually find the work that has been performed, right? So this is all the work that we've been performed. We've, in this specific case, we've selected a sample, we've agreed the rate, we've recalculated the rate based on the face value, and then we have these things called tick marks for other evidence, right? We refer back down here to the tick marks or other evidence, and that basically tells us what other evidence have we done, what other procedures have we done, and it tells us we've agreed it to the confirm or so on, right? So that's the actual audit work. Again, we're not going to get into that now because this is not the purpose of that video. And then right at the end, we have to finish off each working paper with a conclusion. So we conclude on that assertion to say, yes, we've covered that assertion. We've covered the assertions that we set out to do. Sometimes the conclusion might be that we have not received enough evidence and we need to do more work. Okay? And that's fine. It's okay for the conclusion to say that, as long as we follow it up just below the conclusion with the other work that we've done. Okay, so that is a brief overview of working papers for today. We're going to leave that video there, and we'll return next time, and we need to talk about the payroll and expenses cycle.